Thank you, Zelda, and welcome to all our panellists. Rob Pine, of course, most of you will be very familiar with, and now the star of a short film. Rob has been a member of the Legislative Assembly of Queensland since 2015, representing the electorate of Cairns. He was elected for the Australian Labor Party, but resigned to sit as an independent in March 2016. It's marvellous what you can do when you're not beholden to the major parties. Pine was formerly a two-term councillor for the Cairns Regional Council and is the son of former Cairns Mayor Tom Pine. Also with us, Dean. We have Dr. Dean Miller. He's the Director of Science and Media at the Great Barrier Reef Legacy with the legendary John Rumney. He is a scientist, multimedia professional, BBC television presenter and an Australian Geographic-sponsored explorer. He's got a PhD in coral reef management and resource allocation and a wealth of scientific experience. He's also worked as a cameraman, and his footage actually was in the film. So the Climate Council footage of Amanda Mackenzie diving on the reef with Tim Flannery was filmed by Dean. He's also filmed stuff that has been narrated by David Attenborough, so he's a bit of a legend, and we're thrilled to have him down from Douglas today. Also with us we have Jim Brooks. He's worked as a lawyer and mediator specialising in working with communities and individuals, and he ran for Mayor of Cairns, you might remember, in 2015. And we're also really thrilled to have Nerelle Nicol with us. Nerelle is a juru woman. She also ran for council, hey? Some years ago. Her family have long been activists in Cairns, going back to the days when her grandfather left the Torres because the missionaries wanted to take his boat. Wow, so there's a long history of resistance there. She's related to Joe McGuinness, who led the Aboriginal Advancement League and the Vote Yes campaign in the 60s. And she herself was an ATSEC chair in Cairns in the early 90s. She's working on the museum and her own oral history of the 80s and 90s in activism. So looking forward to hearing more about that. Thanks for joining us, everyone. So let's start with you, Nerelle. The Wangan and Jagalingu people in the film, well, they're running their own campaign. They've got 4 court cases running at the moment. And we in the environment, of course, are supporting them financially in any other way that we can. But what about the traditional owners who are affected by this project in your area? You know, because you're a juru woman. What's been your experience of the Adani project so far?
Before I answer that, could I just acknowledge my cousin, Sandra McGuinness here, Joe McGuinness's daughter, who's been a long time advocate, political advocate in this country. And if you've never met anyone I don't know if you've met anyone, but if you want to meet someone who's chained themselves to Parliament House, if we're talking about social change, and that's what the guts and determination that it takes, I would suggest you talk to my cousin Sandra McGuinness, because she's one of the few women in this country who have done that. And the embassy, the Ten Embassy in Canberra. She's got a lot of stories to tell. Maybe she should have been up here. In terms of how Adani's affected my country's around the Bowen area, so the Abbott Point area. And one of the things I can say is I never ever grew up on my country. I was, fortunate to also grow up in a beautiful country of the Cook-Yallochee and Mossman. But we'd travel backward and forward to Juru country. And up until a few years ago, I would class myself as an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander. And in 2014, before 2014, when we got our native title, I could call myself a Juru woman in this country, because for many of us, we wouldn't claim country, introduce ourselves in such a way. So what it's done down there is actually divided my family, something that's never ever happened. So I'm totally opposed to it, that it's not only going to affect my country, but it has destroyed a family, like so many other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families. Native title, well, that's a celebration. Mining companies like Adani have destroyed families, and our family have never ever had that. We've never been divided, and yet today my uncle and aunt, who are the last surviving members of my family, live down south, and we've all been disenfranchised through the process of mining company, the greed of a mining company coming onto our country. You saw the Carmichael mine there. That brought tears to my eyes because I have 3 grandchildren, and I think just looking at that footage, what Guru said earlier, country means a lot to us. It's only of recent times that we've been able to go back and connect to country and our identity and our culture and be able to call ourselves the Aboriginal, by our Aboriginal names. And, that kind of impact is going to impact very much on our families, our identity, our cultural knowledge, and our inherent right to be able to maintain this country that so many of us now call home. And so many people have come to these waters and now call this their country, and we're still at the bottom of the rung as black people in this country. And, the impact that the mine has is going to be of no great benefit to us, and I'm under no illusion that that's going to help my family, and yet it's destroyed everything about us, the very things that have kept us strong and together for so many generations. And I'm totally opposed to that. Sorry, that's probably a long-winded question, but I'm so passionate, I'm so angry, and I feel very upset for it.
Yeah, thanks, Nerelle. Maybe, Jim, while you have the mic now, maybe you could give us a bit of a legal perspective on what's going on with the Adani mine. And, there are 4 court cases, as I mentioned. Native title rights are being challenged in the High Court, Supreme Court. There was the federal court judgment with the Noongar people in WA recently. Where do you think all this is going to head?
Those points are really important, and one of the things that Nerelle described to me last year was the process by which native title approval was obtained, and the prescribed body corporate, which is supposed to represent the interests of the traditional owners there, had a handful of directors who signed off on this approval without any consultation with the traditional owners, and who engaged with Adani in a sales process really afterwards of explaining what they'd done, but wouldn't take any questions from Nerelle or others on the floor about what was in the deal, or what was in the deal for the traditional owners. And another legal issue, I guess in a way, is that myth that needs to be exploded of 10,000 jobs. Adani has promised this, and it gets parroted by politicians all the time. As Adani's own expert told the Land Court, there are 1,464 jobs being created. And the Australia Institute released a study yesterday which showed that actually of those operational jobs that are created, they're going to be offset by the loss of jobs in coal mines in New South Wales. And apart from that, the royalties that the New South Wales government will lose as coal mines close in response to Adani opening will limit the New South Wales government to invest in renewables or to deliver social services as well. And I think with this project it's really important to blow apart the myths around it and ask why the so-called economic rationalists running the country are giving their support to an unfeasible mine. This mine can't operate in the absence of subsidies. The price of coal would have to double for it to be feasible. And it relies on myths such as we need to provide that coal to India to improve the standard of living for Indians. Adani knows that the price of power generated by solar in India is now less than the price of energy generated by coal. Adani knows this because it's built the biggest solar park in India, in Tamil Nadu. And our Australian politicians say, well, look, if we don't sell coal, they'll get it from somewhere else. Now, coal is dead. China in 2015 reduced its internal production of coal by 6% and its importation of coal by 10% in a year in which it used more energy. And the other myth that needs to be exploded is that if renewables were any good, the market would turn to them anyway. And that has to be addressed because the transport grids and the policies of our government are actually tuned towards fossil fuels. And since 1990, the use of renewable energy hasn't increased, except in relation to increased demand. So renewables, nearly 20 years ago, made up somewhere between 9 and 13% of the world's energy consumption, and today renewables make up between 9 and 13% of the world's energy consumption. So without support and without a sound policy basis, renewables can't get ahead of the fossil fuels that will cause catastrophic global warming.
Exactly. I think if we put the subsidies that we put into the fossil fuel industry across into the renewable industry, we'd have the solution to climate change. Dean, you've seen the impacts of global warming on the reef firsthand, and you're one of the first tour operators to actually come out and take a stand. Why aren't other tourist operators on the reef, coming out and really putting pressure on the government to stop exporting coal?